The power of wholeness. 5 signs. Your presence is too much for others. There are people who walk into a room and everything subtly shifts. Not because they are trying to command attention, they are often trying to minimize their presence. But something about them creates an unavoidable discomfort, a fascination, or an intensity that others simply cannot ignore. Here is what Carl Gustav Jung, the pioneering psychiatrist, understood that most people miss. Psychological integration creates presence. Not performance, not persona, not a practiced power move, but genuine, authentic wholeness. When you integrate your shadow, dissolve your false identities, and become authentically yourself, you develop what Jung called psychological density. This is a kind of presence that is palpable, a gravity that shifts the energy in a room. Most people live fragmented. They have split off parts of themselves, maintain brittle personas, perform identities, hide their darkness, and constantly project their shadow onto the world. This internal division creates psychological lightness, even weakness. They are not fully present because they are internally divided. But when someone commits to the work Jung described, shadow integration, ego dissolution, and authentic individuation, they become psychologically whole. And that wholeness creates undeniable intensity. It is not mystical energy or spiritual superiority. It is simple psychology. A whole person has significantly more psychological gravity than a fragmented person. They are more present, more real, more fully themselves, and that sheer realness is either intensely magnetic or profoundly threatening, depending entirely on the other person's level of consciousness. Jung noticed this pattern in his own life. After his intense confrontation with the unconscious, his period of profound psychological integration, people responded to him drastically differently. Some were intensely drawn to him. Others became uncomfortable, hostile, or avoidant. His presence had changed, not because he was trying to be powerful, but because he had become psychologically whole. If you are experiencing similar patterns, people responding to you with unusual intensity, whether positive or negative, Jung would suggest you have achieved a level of integration most people actively avoid. These 5 signs reveal exactly how your integrated presence affects others and why most people simply cannot handle it. People feel psychologically exposed around you. The first sign your presence is too powerful is also the most common. People feel psychologically exposed around you, not because you are judging them, but because your authenticity reveals their inauthenticity. Your mere presence acts like a mirror that reflects what they are desperately hiding from themselves. Here is the psychological mechanism. When you have integrated your shadow and dissolved your personas, you stop performing. You are just you, authentic, immediate, real, with no filtering, no hiding. And that raw authenticity is psychologically threatening to people who are still heavily performing, hiding, and meticulously maintaining false selves. Think of it like standing next to someone in bright, unfiltered sunlight when they have been applying their makeup in dim lighting. They thought the performance was convincing, the makeup seamless. But in bright light, every imperfection is visible. Every bit of artifice is suddenly obvious. They are not upset about the sunlight itself. They are upset that it is revealing the performance they were trying to hide. Your authenticity is the sunlight. You are not doing anything to them. Your mere existence reveals the elaborate performance they are maintaining. Jung observed this constantly. Patients who had done deep integration work would report that people became immediately uncomfortable around them. Friends would say, "You've changed," or "You make me feel bad about myself." But the integrated person wasn't actively doing anything. Their wholeness was simply revealing the other's fragmentation. This is the first sign of powerful presence. People feel seen, exposed, and transparent around you. Their personas feel thin. Their performances feel obvious. Their shadow material feels visible, not because you are pointing it out, but because your authenticity makes their inauthenticity impossible to ignore. Some people respond to this by being drawn to you. They recognize your authenticity as permission for their own. But the majority respond by avoidance, discomfort, or hostility because maintaining their performance requires everyone else to keep performing. Your authenticity threatens the collective agreement to stay unconscious. Jung was clear. You are not responsible for making others comfortable with your authenticity. The exposure they feel is their own psyche trying to show them their fragmentation. Whether they use that awareness to grow or retreat deeper into performance is their choice, not your responsibility. You unsettle collective consciousness. If the first sign explains individual reactions, this second one reveals why groups, communities, and entire collectives often struggle with your presence. You unsettle collective consciousness. Groups that operate on a foundation of shared unconsciousness become instantly destabilized by your presence because you are no longer participating in the collective agreements everyone else maintains. Every group has unspoken agreements. Families agree on roles, the caretaker, the problem child. Friend groups agree on personalities, the wild one, the serious one. Communities agree on what is acceptable and what is taboo. These agreements create the collective identity, and the collective viciously resists anyone who threatens those agreements. When you have individuated, when you become authentically yourself rather than playing assigned roles, you automatically violate collective agreements. You are no longer the person the family needs you to be. You are no longer conforming to workplace expectations. You are no longer accepting community limitations. Jung called this individuation's threat to the collective. The collective requires conformity to function. When someone individuates, they withdraw their participation in the collective unconsciousness, and the collective responds with pressure, punishment, or rejection, anything to force conformity again. A patient who had done profound integration work returned to her family for a gathering. She did not perform her usual role, the peacemaker, the absorber of problems. She was just present, authentic, and boundaried. The family immediately imploded. They accused her of being cold, selfish, and changed. What they truly meant was, you are not playing your assigned role, and that is threatening our entire system. Jung told her, you haven't become cold, you've become whole, and your wholeness reveals that the family system was based on your fragmentation. They need you fragmented to maintain their unconsciousness. Your integration is an existential threat to their collective identity. This is the second sign. Groups become unstable around you, not because you are actively disruptive, but because your presence reveals collective patterns that depend on shared unconsciousness. Your authenticity exposes family dynamics that require certain members to play limiting roles, social groups that bond through mutual judgment, workplace cultures that maintain hierarchy through shared fear. Think of it like one person stopping in a perfectly coordinated dance. Everyone has been moving in synchronized patterns. Then one person simply stops dancing and stands there, being themselves. Suddenly the whole choreography becomes obvious. The person who stopped isn't disrupting anything. They are just no longer participating in the unconscious agreement to keep dancing. Your presence doesn't fit into predictable collective patterns. You cannot be easily categorized, controlled, or predicted. And that unpredictability is profoundly destabilizing to groups that operate on unconscious agreements. When you recognize this, that your presence unsettles collectives, you stop trying to fit into group dynamics that require your fragmentation. You accept that individuated people often exist on the edges of collectives, not embedded within them, simply due to incompatibility between wholeness and collective unconsciousness. Your silence carries more weight than most people's words. The first two signs explained how your presence affects others, but this third one reveals the quality of your presence itself. Your silence carries more weight than most people's words. When you are quiet, people feel it. When you are present, people notice. Your mere existence in a space shifts the energy, not because you are trying, but because you are psychologically dense. Most people fill silence with noise. They talk to avoid discomfort. They perform to maintain attention. Their presence is sustained entirely through constant output. Words, actions, reactions stop the output, and they disappear from awareness. But when you have integrated, your presence does not depend on performance. You can sit in silence and people still feel you there. You can be completely still and people still track your reactions. You can say nothing and people wonder what you are thinking. Your presence is self-sustaining. Think of the difference between a loudspeaker and a tuning fork. The speaker has to keep producing sound to be noticed. Turn it off and it is dead equipment. But a tuning fork, once struck, continues subtly resonating. The vibration is persistent and deep. Your presence is the tuning fork. Not loud, but deeply resonant. Not demanding attention, but impossible to ignore. Jung noticed this. Their silence had a quality. Their stillness had an impact. They didn't need to speak to be heard. Something about their integrated presence created psychological weight that others felt even when they were completely quiet. One patient, after deep work, described this discovery. I stopped trying to be interesting, stopped performing in conversations, stopped filling silence. And something strange happened. People became more interested in what I had to say, not less. When I did speak, they listened differently. My silence made my words more powerful. This is the third sign. Your presence has a density that doesn't require performance. You cannot blend into backgrounds anymore. You cannot hide in groups. You cannot disappear into social situations. Your presence announces itself whether you want it to or not. Jung would say this is undeniable evidence of integration. Fragmented people can hide in plain sight. They are performing personas that blend. Whole people stand out simply by being themselves, not from effort, but from authenticity that creates psychological density. When you recognize this, that your silence carries weight, you stop apologizing for your presence. You accept that integration creates visibility, and visibility is the price of wholeness. People project their shadow onto you. The first three signs explain the general effects of your presence, but this fourth one reveals why that effect is often intensely negative and why you become a target. People project their shadow onto you. What they have vehemently denied in themselves, they now see in you. Your integrated darkness becomes the screen for their disowned darkness, and they will attack you for qualities they refuse to acknowledge in themselves. Here is the psychological mechanism. Most people repress their shadow, the parts of themselves they consider unacceptable: anger, selfishness, aggression, ambition. They cannot own these qualities, so they project them onto others. When you have integrated your shadow, you are no longer repressing these qualities. You have made them conscious. You own your capacity for darkness, while consciously choosing not to act destructively. But that ownership, that conscious relationship with your shadow, intensely triggers others' projections. They see in you what they cannot see in themselves. If they have repressed their anger, they will perceive you as angry, even when you are calm. If they have denied their selfishness, they will accuse you of being selfish, even when you are merely setting healthy boundaries. If they have rejected their ambition, they will see you as power-hungry, even when you are simply confident. Jung watched this constantly. Integrated patients would report being accused of the very qualities they had transcended through integration. The person who had integrated rage and learned boundaries would be called aggressive. The person who had accepted their ambition would be deemed manipulative. One man who had done years of shadow work described it: "I integrated my capacity for violence, not to become violent, but to own that I'm capable of it and choose differently. Now people say I'm threatening or dangerous. Even though I'm less violent than ever, they're projecting their disowned violence onto me because I'm no longer repressing mine." This is the fourth sign. You become the container for others' disowned darkness. You are called too much by people who have repressed their intensity. You are labeled selfish by people who cannot prioritize themselves. Think of it like someone throwing their trash into your yard because they refuse to acknowledge they produce trash. They maintain the fiction that their property is pristine by dumping their waste onto yours. Then they point at your yard and say, "Look how messy that person is." The trash is not yours, it is theirs. But they need someone to carry it so they can avoid seeing that they produce it. Jung was clear. These projections are not your truth. They are others' disowned material. Trying to defend against them is futile because the projection is not actually about you. When you recognize this, that people project their shadow onto you, you stop taking their accusations personally. You understand they are not seeing you. They are seeing their disowned selves reflected in your wholeness. Your presence demands growth or distance. The previous signs explained the various effects of your presence, but this final one reveals the ultimate pattern that governs all your interactions. Your presence creates a binary. People either grow around you or distance themselves from you. There is rarely a middle ground. You catalyze transformation or trigger avoidance. And most people choose avoidance. Here is the psychological reality. Your wholeness confronts others with their fragmentation, not through words, but through mere existence. When people are around you, they feel the discrepancy between your integration and their own fragmentation. And that discrepancy creates pressure, an unconscious pressure to either grow toward wholeness or retreat into comfortable unconsciousness. Some people respond to this pressure by growing. Your authenticity gives them permission for theirs. Your integration shows them what is possible. Your presence catalyzes their transformation. These people are drawn to you intensely, not because you are perfect, but because you are whole. But most people respond to this pressure by creating distance. Your presence is too uncomfortable. The gap between your consciousness and their unconsciousness is too stark. The psychological work your wholeness implies is too daunting. So they avoid you, drift away, or create conflict that justifies separation. Jung observed this. After significant integration work, people's social circles would completely reorganize. Some relationships deepened dramatically, becoming more authentic and intimate. But most relationships ended, not through dramatic conflict, but through quiet drifting, as people unconsciously chose distance over growth. One patient described this reorganization. "After my shadow work, I lost most of my friends, not because I changed who I liked, but because I stopped pretending. I stopped maintaining relationships based on shared unconsciousness. Some met me in that authenticity, and our relationships deepened. But most people just disappeared. My presence demanded either growth or distance, and they chose distance." Jung told her, "This isn't rejection, it's selection. Your integration is naturally selecting for people capable of meeting you in consciousness." This is the fifth sign. Your relationships become polarized. People either move closer, drawn by your authenticity, or move away, unable to maintain performance around you, choosing unconsciousness over the growth you represent. There is rarely anything in between. Casual friendships become difficult because your presence is too intense for surface connection. You either connect deeply or not at all. Think of it like a heat source in a cold room. Some people move toward the heat, but most people move away from the heat source. They are used to the cold, and the warmth is uncomfortable, demanding, too intense. The heat isn't doing anything to them, it's just being heat. but its mere existence forces everyone to choose, move closer and get warm, or move away and stay cold. There is no comfortable middle distance. This polarization can feel profoundly lonely. You lose the middle ground of casual relationships. But what you gain is depth, relationships with the few people capable of meeting you in wholeness. Jung believed this was the necessary price of individuation. Wholeness is inherently polarizing. You cannot be integrated and universally comfortable to be around. When you recognize this, that your presence demands growth or distance, you stop trying to make everyone comfortable. You stop attempting to maintain relationships that require your fragmentation. You accept that integration naturally selects for conscious relationships, owning your integrated presence. If you are experiencing these 5 patterns, Jung would say you have achieved a level of integration that most people avoid, and that integration creates a presence most people simply cannot handle. The 5 signs reveal the full impact. Exposure. Your authenticity reveals others' inauthenticity. Unsettling. Your individuation threatens collective unconsciousness. Density. Your silence is louder than others' words. Projection. People project their shadow onto you. Polarization. Your presence demands growth or distance. These are not signs you are doing something wrong. They are evidence you are doing something right. The psychological work most people avoid. That work, shadow integration, ego dissolution, authentic individuation, created wholeness. And wholeness creates powerful presence. Jung's promise: stop apologizing for your presence. Stop trying to minimize yourself to fit collective expectations. Your intensity isn't aggression, it's authenticity. Your presence isn't too much, it is whole. The people who can't handle it aren't wrong, they're just not ready. And that is not your problem to solve. Your responsibility is simply being whole, not making fragmented people comfortable with your wholeness. Own your presence. Accept its power. Trust that it will naturally attract the few who can meet you there and naturally repel the many who cannot. That is not rejection, that is selection. And selection is how consciousness finds consciousness.